Rosalind's lips parted. Her expression went numb as she stared at the fiend corpses sprawled across the courtyard and beyond. Then she lifted her gaze to the night sky still smudged with the last embers of dusk. Leora raised her head in a daze, thoughts churning like sludge.
He'd left without a word, because no words had been needed. He'd meant to be back before dark.
3 Core Formation Fiend Monarchs had fallen inside Tin Yang Commandery in a single day. Nero Yule crouched at the gate, baffled, and tugged absently at the dead lion's mane.
He couldn't wrap his head around it. The 2 Fiend Monarchs he'd stalemated for years. How had they ended up like this at his feet?
After a long silence, Nero Yule stood and turned to the young man inside the house.
What should I do now?
Soren realized the man meant it. A devil, suppressing general was asking him for orders.
Guard Tin Yang Commandery, I guess.
Soren said, uncertain. Nero Yule let his hands fall, gaze drifting over the fiend bodies.
But guard it from what?
A flicker of confusion passed through Soren's eyes.
Really? Did he need to be taught how to slack off?
Nero Yule caught himself and laughed ruefully, massaging his temple. The burden he'd carried for years had vanished, but instead of relief, he felt only disorientation. It had all happened too fast.
You 2 talk. I'll take a walk.
He strode through the gate and down the quiet streets, his pace quickening with each step. Soren turned back to Leora. Leora bit her lip hard.
If this man could slaughter 2 Core Formation Fiend Monarchs in a few hours, nothing she had to say was worth an evening of his time.
She pulled out her exquisite silver bell token and set it on the table with exaggerated care. What Leora had wanted to tell him was simple. She'd been chasing his shadow with everything she had, and she'd hoped to share that small joy with him. Soren studied the token in silence. Then he reached to his waist, drew out a strand of the Qing, Min She, Su's essence blood, and let it fall into the bell.
Once, Azari's life in its early stage had brought him 2 Jade Liquid Esoterica Manual's techniques that had carried him through slaying the Serpent Fiend, toppling 2 along, and stepping into core condensation. Now that he had power to spare, he could return that borrowed favor.
Rosalind stared as the blood threaded its way into the bell.
What did a Core Formation Fiend Monarch's essence blood mean? A peak core condensation method, at least 5 martial temple cleansing ceremonies, or an artifact strong enough to anchor a commandery's defense. Accomplishments no one else in Azure Province had claimed in many years. But
Rosalind's gaze toward the younger girl grew complicated. Sure enough, Leora stared at the bell in distress.
Oh, that's not what I meant.
Before she could say more,
I know.
Soren rose quietly.
You don't have to push like this. A Jade Liquid Peak Martial Cultivator, no matter how hard she drove herself, could change nothing.
Leora had never hated so much how well she understood him, how clearly she could hear the half of the sentence he left unsaid the moment he stopped speaking.
Anything else?
He walked over. Seeing her stubbornly hang her head, he reached out without warning and ruffled her hair.
Don't get melodramatic.
He still thought her solo trip into Northcliff had been reckless, but he preferred the sly, spirited girl she used to be, the one who'd cross her legs with her life hanging by a thread and tease.
Call me Master once, and I'll help you take your first step. Deal?
She'd fought tooth and nail to survive. She ought to spend that life on things that mattered. Not this desperate, foolish race.
Leora felt like lightning had hit her. She sat rigid, head spinning.
I'm off.
Soren walked out. Rosalind watched the Forest family girl with envy, then caught herself.
It's so late. Where are you going?
Elder General Chen asked me to visit Linfeng Jun when I had time. Give my farewells to General Yu.
The young man dissolved into a breeze and vanished from the courtyard. Rosalind pulled her gaze away reluctantly and found Leora still sitting in a daze on the bed's edge. She laughed, a little helpless.
Should I still change your dressing?
The girl nodded furiously. Beyond Azure Province, mountain ranges stacked endlessly, and creatures stirred among the peaks. 2 figures walked through the woods, both clad in heavy scale, male. The one on the left was pale and beardless, an elephant's trunk hanging to its belly. The one on the right had dry, brittle fur, a gaunt, aging wolf. They stopped before a waterfall that looked utterly ordinary. The wolf halted, and Shang Yao took up a place behind him. Then the wolf spoke in an even tone.
The Howling Moon Fiend King has come calling. We request the Young Fiend King to show himself.
Birdsong echoed through the mountains. Howling Moon Fiend King showed no impatience. He clasped his hands behind his back and waited like a creature with all the time in the world. At last, the waterfall parted, revealing a damp, slick cavern. Inside sat the massive bull demon, muscles coiled with crushing pressure. He stared out with cold bell, like eyes that hid a trace of wariness.
Curious. To seek me while I heal from my wounds. That's a first. I'm rather interested to hear what you want.
The old wolf fiend laughed, shook his head, and stepped into the grotto. He was far smaller than the young fiend king. He sat casually on a stone ledge.
No need to be wary. This king didn't come with aggression. I only wanted to offer a word of caution.
Caution about what?
The bull demon rumbled, staring down.
A caution, nothing more, because of this recent affair. This king lost a great general to pacify the old dragon of Yangchun Fang. I had to gift it a precious panacea as well, to compensate for its 3 dead brothers.
Howling Moon Fiend King bared yellowed fangs.
I know you want to prove you're no weaker than Azure, but you've tried too many times. Each time, I've had to pay with the lives of my subordinates.
Bull demon's eyes narrowed, a teasing edge entering his voice.
Old fool! Are you blaming me?
He knew the other had silently given much, but an interrogation like this he would not tolerate.
Insolence!
Xiang Yao's face turned icy. He stepped forward abruptly. At Bull Demon's feet, the dying old hound cracked open an eye and stared coldly at Xiang Yao. His voice was hoarse.
Get back!
Howling Moon Fiend King raised a hand, cutting off their stares.
Young Fiend King, you misunderstand. I only meant to advise raising your realm is part of your strength. There's no need to demand fairness from that woman in every little thing.
Seeing the old wolf relent, Bull Demon's attitude softened.
Once I nurse these wounds, breakthrough is just a final push. When the time comes, I'll eliminate your greatest threat for you. I won't touch this scrap of territory you cling to.
All I want is Azure Province.
Shaw, Wei worried that if Azure broke through, it would trigger a massive counterattack from all of Azure Province. These old monsters had long lost their fight. They only craved stability. Hearing the other didn't even care to deal with his own woman.
Then I will trouble you, Young Fiend King.
Howling Moon Fiend King's eyes were heavy with exhaustion. With the promise secured, he seemed to breathe easier.
Allow me to offer a small thanks. This brother clearly won't survive. He is kin to me. Let me take him back and nourish him with my essence blood to preserve his life.
At those words, Go Yao's eyelids twitched. Wariness flickered across his face. The young Fiend King hesitated, then glanced at his subordinate's horrifying wounds, torn open by Voidfrost's Sevenbane sword intent. That subordinate had escorted him from home, all the way to Azure Province. Loyal, silent, never a single complaint. It wounded his pride, but he couldn't refuse.
Thank you.
Fiend King.
Old Hound struggled to rise.
Don't worry about me. Focus on healing.
The young Fiend King's voice was cold. Only then did Xiang Yao step forward to steady Go Yao. Go Yao clenched his long spear, helpless as he obeyed. Sha, Wei stood and walked from the cave. Then he looked back, his gaze carrying a deep meaning.
Hurry. Time is running out.
Bull Demon's expression chilled.
Don't squander the last scrap of goodwill I have for you.
Only after the 3 figures vanished into the distance did he close his eyes. The broad waterfall sealed itself shut. A long while later, on the blue stone outside the falls, a petite young girl slowly revealed herself. Lian's heart, shadowed for centuries now, churned with violent emotion. Tension tightened her delicate features. What she would never have dared to dream of was unfolding before her with startling ease. The sheer impossibility of it sent Lian into a brief trance. The heavily wounded young Fiend King. This might be the greatest prize the Azure Province demon hunters had seized in years. She fought to master her emotions. Her fingers flew through a series of spell seals, drawing stray wisps of aura into her palm. They coalesced into a tiny, leaping flame. Lian sealed the aura within the golden bell, then turned and activated the Tortoise Breath, Sutra, and Phantasm Form Scripture, vanishing without a sound. Azure Province, Linfang Jun, Demon Suppression General's Mansion. Sovereign stared at the letter from Verdant City, written in Azure's own hand. According to its contents, his devil-suppressing general should have reached Linfang Jun days ago. So, Where was she? Liu Yu, Chuen stood awkwardly to the side, watching the white-haired old man pull out the letter, scrutinize it, and let out the same weary sigh. He offered the usual comfort.
Perhaps some matter on the road delayed her.
Sovereign tucked the letter away.
Young people are all busy. It's perfectly normal. I truly don't mind.
By all logic, after her martial temple refinement in the imperial capital, she should have reached the perfected stage of condensed pill and already be in core formation soul nourishment. How could she not be anxious to get here? The old master genuinely believed the county's incense faith power was going to waste on himself. Over 800 years old, and still unable to push his divine embryo past the third barrier into a true yin spirit. If it were Soren, he would put that power to far better use. Now he was just waiting for her to arrive, to let her familiarize herself with Lin Fang Jun, and then this old bag of bones could retire.
Master Chen, Generals Shen and Chen have arrived with their troops.
2 junior officers strode over, cupping fists. Liu Yu, Chuen breathed a sigh of relief, then froze as Master Chen, who had just declared he didn't mind, sprang to his feet and strode out of the main hall with powerful steps. Liu sighed. The general truly felt his strength failing him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a hurry. He could only hope General Shen's army would give the old man some well-earned rest. In the front courtyard, Sovereign's gaze settled on the handsome young man in icy profound armor. He found himself more and more satisfied each time they met. This meeting felt different. Having crossed paths 2 or 3 times now, the other was no longer so distant. A trace of anticipation even flickered in his eyes. Sovereign had no idea what the young man was anticipating. But he wasn't a petty man. Whatever Lin Fang Jun could offer, he would not begrudge. After all, everything here would belong to the other, sooner or later.
Soren greets the old general.
Soren said, cupping his hands.
No more of that subordinate posture. You are now a great general of this land as well.
Sovereign shook his head. He had to admit, for all the distance between them, the other's attitude had never once shifted, from personal aide and adjutant general to devil. Suppressing general, he still treated this old man the same.
Come in.
He led the way and gestured for Soren to sit. A trace of sentiment crept into his voice.
You're not one to visit without a reason. This must be the first time you've set aside time just to see an old man like me.
Liu Yu, Chuen stood to the side, secretly amused. General Shen not only rarely visited General Chen, the entire Lin Fang army's General Shen barely set foot here at all. Soren paused, then spoke softly.
Actually, there is something.
Sovereign's movements faltered. He sighed.
I swear, I've never met anyone busier than you in all of Azure Province. Out with it, then. What business could the Shen army possibly have for a useless old man like me?
The old flood dragon of Yangsheng River.
Soren began to relate, unhurried and direct, the message he'd received from the verdant, faced lion. As his words unfolded, both Sovereign and Liu Yu, Chuen's faces darkened in an instant.
The Howling Moon Fiend King wants to help that old dragon break through.
The old man's voice turned solemn. He'd only just labored past the second hurdle of core formation, barely enough to tangle with the old dragon. If it broke through again, among all the great generals of Azure Province, only Nero Yule and Azure herself might still be able to handle it. And General Yu was already run ragged, unable to split himself further, while Azure was no expert at fighting fiends on the Wind River. Instinctively, he thought to send word to High Marshal Valerius, but as a veteran of many campaigns, realization struck him in a flash.
Could the Fiend King be scheming to use my hand to pin High Marshal Valerius at Yangchun River?
The yin spirit of a martial immortal was formidable, but the surging waters of the Wind River were not easily tamed. If the old flood dragon refused to show itself for a day, would the High Marshal's yin spirit have to stand vigil by the river for just as long?
You.
Liu Yu Chuen opened his mouth in exasperation. General Shen had spelled it out clearly. The fiends had lost a white deer and now wanted Azure Province to pay with a life. Elder Chen, advanced in years and waning in strength, was the easiest target. They wanted your life, and yet here you are worrying about something else. He couldn't stop himself.
What General Shen means is that you should withdraw and avoid the danger.
Soren looked at him in silence.
Since when was that? What I meant.
Sovereign caught the shift in his expression.
Speak freely. Don't hold back.
At that, Soren stopped standing on ceremony. He rose to his feet.
I'd like you, Elder, to take up position by the river bank, and if possible, be as conspicuous as you can.
The moment the words fell, both listeners fell silent. It figured. Coming from a demon hunter, that kind of method felt all too familiar.
I understand. You want to pin down the dragon's location, to make sure it doesn't miss me and burst out somewhere else to wreak havoc.
Sovereign struggled to find a diplomatic way to phrase it. He really didn't want to think of himself as dragon bait.
But even if we use General Chen to lure the old flood dragon out, how exactly do we deal with it?
Liu Yu, Chuen asked on reflex. Before he finished, he caught the old general's icy glance. He shut his mouth, uncertain what he'd said wrong this time. Sovereign steadied his breathing. At last he understood what that glint of expectation in the young man's eyes was truly after. He wanted this old relic's life. Even so, he was curious about the answer. He looked at the young man with genuine interest. Soren said calmly,
Leave the rest to me.
Hiss.
Liu Yu, Chuen grabbed at his hair. That familiar feeling swept him right back to a month ago, heading to Cypress Cloud County to slay Zuri. The same expression, the exact same tone, right before Soren calmly skinned that Fox Clan member clean. The problem was, this time they were facing not a core formation perfected Zeri, but a core formation old flood dragon, and right at the Yangshan River where it had lived for millennia.
I understand.
Sovereign nodded, then said flatly,
You really do want this old man's life after all.
Before Soren could reply, the old man let out a carefree laugh.
From what I've heard, General Shen has never let anyone down.
And truly, there was no better option at the moment. He too rose to his feet.
Only one problem. I'm really not sure how to be conspicuous. Allow me to make some preparations.
Soren dipped his chin slightly.
Then I won't disturb the old general any further.
He wasn't much good at such things. He had no advice to offer. Still, the old man agreed so readily. That came as a bit of a surprise. He hadn't expected the old general to trust him so deeply. He strode out of the hall. After about a dozen steps, a faint voice drifted from behind him.
Send word to Azure. Tell her to come save this old man quickly.
The sparkling Yangshan River stretched wide and majestic before its expanse. Human strength seemed pitifully small. Wisps of cookfire smoke rose along the bank, carrying a rich, meaty aroma. Huge stew pots were lined up, one after another, vanishing into the distance. Officers and lieutenants in ink-black cloud-pattern robes, or draped in Grimwolf mantles, had never carried out an order like this. No wine, but meat. And they were to devour it by the mouthful. As for the meat's source, 3 hideous flood dragon heads hung high overhead. Their 100 Jang bodies lay coiled on the Fang shore. Though dead for some time, they still looked startlingly alive. No trace of decay. Those officers with a touch of culinary skill used their precious blades to carve meat from the carcasses, boiled it over roaring fires, and seasoned it with fine salt, doing their best to make it palatable. The old general sat at the front in his profound armor, a small table before him. Calm, unhurried, he poured half a bowl of wine, took a slow sip, and fixed a cold gaze on the river. Even the surging roar of the waves couldn't stir his composure. Before that silent, awe-inspiring presence, the Yangshan River itself seemed to lose some of its majesty. Demon, suppressing river patrol. The Linfang army officers chewed their flood dragon meat, shooting reverent glances at the old man. They all said General Chen was old and spent. But who could have guessed a fading tiger still harbored wrath in its bones? The instant those tiger eyes snapped open, he was the same devil-suppressing general who made all Linfang Jun tremble. 2 months ago, the flood dragons of Yangshun Fang crept from the waters to plague the living. Today, Elder General Chen would stand before them and show the beasts what demon suppression division methods truly meant. Tear flesh, drink blood. With that chaos, iron great halberd, he pressed the entire water tribe so low they couldn't lift their heads. Sovereign almost needed the stiffness from his face, but the scorching stares at his back stopped him. The young ones following him, how many years since they could hold their heads high? Not all devil, suppressing generals were the same. Jade Mountain Commandery, under Azure's sheer, intimidating presence, saw no fiends dare trespass. Even when she left for months, the city remained undisturbed. Her colonels and lieutenants only ran basic patrols, but the youngsters under his command spent every waking hour crushed beneath fiend pressure. They couldn't relax for a single moment. Since they'd stumbled onto this rare high, he might as well not spoil it. Only, Sovereign gazed at the placid river and couldn't suppress a silent sigh. If that old flood dragon broke through once more, it would reach a level rivaling a core formation martial artist who had shattered 3 passes, on its own territory, no less. Neither he nor Azure could slay it then. The joke he'd made, when sending Liu Yu Chuen with the message, was really a hope to borrow Azure Province's sharpest sword, at least to drive the old flood dragon back into the depths. Otherwise, Lin Fangjun would turn into a slaughterhouse for the living. As for agreeing to Soren's plan, aside from genuinely admiring the young man and indulging a bit of foolishness with him, it was also because a devil, suppressing general shouldn't cower inside a commandery city, shoving the common folk he'd sworn to protect out to die in his place. In a distant village, several people gathered around a table. The villagers had been evacuated long ago, save for 2 stubborn holdouts. The widow carefully scooped flood, dragon meat from the pot onto the table, stealing timid glances at the young man seated there in profound armor and a crimson half-cape. Months had passed. He still wore that gold-patterned jet-black saber at his waist. The icy slaughter on his handsome features had eased, but the pressure he radiated now far exceeded before, as if too much killing had tempered the balefulness inward. Madman, once disheveled, now looked clean, cut and refined. He brought out the household's hidden wine and respectfully filled both cups. Theron had no mind for drink, worry reaved his face, but he kept silent company. He'd learned through many encounters to stay quiet around Soren. The things that man meant to do weren't his to question. Soren closed his eyes, sinking into inner vision. Within his chi si, the Tao seed inside the heaven, devouring inner core, stood sturdy, emitting a dim crimson glow. A dense white mist swirled around it. Since arriving in Linfangjun, this incense, faith power, had grown increasingly abundant. Strange. Even if someone had built a temple in his name, how could the harvest be so bountiful so soon after crossing over? He couldn't recall doing anything worthy of offerings and worship. No point overthinking. He'd already been nurturing the idea of raising a Tao infant and a yin spirit at once, with time to spare now. He might as well try. He opened his eyes, brought up the panel, and fixed his gaze on the 9,000 odd years of remaining lifespan. Once more he deduced the heaven, devouring elixir scripture. But this time, instead of relying on fiend core cultivation, he focused squarely on the incense faith power.
Year 1. You begin attempting to plant the divine seed. Asterisk.
In an instant, the white mist that had been drifting toward him on instinct was greedily sucked into the inner core within his chi-si. Watching this, Soren finally understood why the yin spirit path was called a shortcut. He didn't need to laboriously gather anything at all. Simply sitting here, the incense faith power surged in from all directions. Perhaps because he'd undergone this process once before, progress was utterly smooth, without mishap.
Year 932. You have successfully condensed the divine seed. Asterisk.
The white mist, invisible to the naked eye, thinned. In its place inside the inner core, a white point of light pulsed slowly in tandem, gleaming in mutual splendor with the crimson Tao seed. Had it succeeded that easily, Soren lifted his wine cup to hide his astonishment. The white dot seemed entirely separate from the crimson Tao seed. He could see threads of blood extending from both, overlapping each other like a soul reaching out to touch flesh and passing straight through. No need to squeeze them together, but the white point brought no discernible improvement. His strength and aura hadn't changed at all. Unfortunately, the incense faith power was now largely exhausted. Otherwise, he would have continued the deduction to see what new transformations might come. He dismissed the panel and probed the function of the white divine seed. His original hope was for Master Chen to provoke the flood dragon. Let it see its own flesh, and blood brothers butchered and eaten. Then in a fit of fury force a breakthrough, destabilize its realm and drastically weaken it. But now, the Yangshan River was quieter than usual. That old wretch, after so many years, had some composure after all. Then at last, the old man rose. Joy surged in the subordinates' eyes, but before it could show, they saw waves slam against Fang'an. In the middle of the muddy Yangshun River, a pitch-black line suddenly emerged, stretching at least 200 jang. The crowd froze. Pupils contracted violently, goosebumps erupting across their skin. A jet-black shadow spread beneath the water, rapidly widening until it swallowed more than half the river's surface. That black line was unmistakably the spine of some monstrous aquatic beast. Clearly, Elder Chen had not intimidated the dragon clan lurking in the Yangshan River. These creatures had likely dwelt here longer than Lin Fangjun existed.
Form ranks.
The lieutenants rose as one, quickly deploying along Fang'an under the deputy general's lead. Old Flood Dragon would be handled by General Chen. The two had crossed paths for years. Since the general's recent breakthrough, he could just barely match the beast. And if the old man dared give the order, he must have anticipated the dragon clan's counterattack and felt fully confident. Their duty was to hold Fang'an and stop other water denizens from slipping into Lin Fangjun in the chaos. In the next moment, a black ridge slowly broke the surface, revealing scales with a metallic luster. The colossal body churned the river, and a sharp, ferocious head shot upward. The flood dragon opened its enormous maw, fangs bared, a crimson tongue protruding, as it loosed a high, piercing roar that surged into the heavens. The sound waves swept outward. Many lieutenants stumbled, clasping their ears, staring in terror at the river. Propelled by its sinuous body, the sodden dragon head rose 100 jang, the swiftly ascending black shadow blotting out the sky. Yet even now, most of its body remained hidden underwater. After many years, the overlord of the Yangshun River had finally shown its ferocity again. Old Flood Dragon peered down at the profound armor figure on the shore, vertical pupils glinting with frigid intent.
Sovereign, who gave you the audacity to provoke me?
Sovereign had accepted a demon king's gift, and from the start he'd meant to kill this old man once he broke through. Yet before he could emerge to settle the score, the other party had shown even greater nerve. Sovereign let out a slow breath and wrapped his fingers tight around the chaos. Iron Great Halberd. The aura Old Flood Dragon now gave off confirmed every scrap of intelligence Soren had brought him. Even among the 16 demon lords serving under Shaw, Wei, with the home ground advantage of Yang Chunfeng, this beast could rank no lower than third.
General, how do you like our odds?
Liu Yu, Xuan had plainly spotted that something was off with the old man.
How long until Azure gets here?
Li Yu, Xuan ran the numbers.
Half a day.
How have I treated you?
Sovereign's gaze slid back to the flood dragon in the sky.
As close as flesh and blood.
Li Yu, Xuan answered without a heartbeat of pause.
That kid is drowning in work. Odds are we can't count on him. Remember to burn incense for me every year.
Sovereign shut his eyes. The Chaos Iron Great Halberd tore from his hand with a resonant hum and shot straight into the heavens. The same halberd that had once nearly killed Hangzhou Zhang in a single blow now looked faintly weak before Old Flood Dragon. As expected, the beast sneered. A lazy flick of its tail churned the breath of Yang Chunfeng into violence. Savage waves reared tens of jang high, poised to swallow everything in their path. To that titanic creature, every twitch was a catastrophe a tiny water cloud township could scarcely imagine. The lieutenants and deputy generals could slay demons, but they had no means to halt such monstrous waves. They could only channel their energy and brace, watching helplessly as the sky, devouring wave hurled itself toward the shore. Then, the colossal wave froze in midair. Surprise flared in Old Flood Dragon's eyes.
Oh?
The river water turned gentle. It shaped itself into a long bridge that surged toward the distant village. The eerie sight struck everyone dumb. Even the great halberd spun in the air and aimed its point foolishly toward the village. In the span of a few breaths, a young man clad in ebonlight mystic armor strode out of the village and stepped onto the water bridge. Soren gazed at the distant flood dragon, and the river waves beneath his feet abruptly surged upward, carrying him across the sky as he casually snatched the chaos. Iron Great Halberd out of the air. Sovereign's eyes snapped open, and his fist clenched on instinct.
That brat! What's the meaning of this?
He was a core formation cultivator, nurturing a divine embryo. Yet he'd been stripped of his weapon before he could even struggle.
General.
Yu Chuen slowly turned his head.
Forget the weapon. Wasn't something else even more absurd?
They were all martial artists. Even if General Shen's cultivation far outstripped theirs, this posture of riding the river waves through the air like a descending god, what martial manual taught that? High above, 100 jang up, Soren stood amid the clustering waves and held the chaos. Iron Great Halberd. His crimson cloak beat in the wind and became a smear of rosy haze burned into every onlooker's sight. He looked down at the flood dragon below. An inexplicable displeasure rose in him. Here above Yang Chunfeng, he felt as though he stood in an intimately familiar domain, and now a beast had trespassed into his territory.
So this old man swaggered around because he'd called in help.
Old Flood Dragon eyed the young man in profound armor warily. Another devil-suppressing general, but an unfamiliar one. No, wait. The beast caught an exceptionally familiar scent on him. Before it could place the scent, a metallic gleam blazed in its vertical pupils. The Chaos Iron Great Halberd shot forth, driven by the seventh, metamorphosis physical power of a Xianyao body, and slammed square into the ferocious dragon's skull. The colossal creature lurched backward and began to topple toward the shore. As the shadow swallowed them, the officers of the Demon Suppression Division sprinted for their lives, but Old Flood Dragon never struck the ground. The young man casually balled his fist. Broad streams of water erupted from the river and coiled around the dragon's body like massive pythons. Its forehead bone, tough as refined iron, now lay pierced clean through by the halberd, blood streaking its ghastly eyes. One exchange had revealed far too many anomalies. It was not alone in noticing. The disarmed sovereign and Liu Yu, Quan stood beside Fang On, their faces uniformly slack with shock and doubt. Was this a devil, suppressing general fighting, a core formation, demon lord? Why couldn't they recognize a single martial technique Soren had just used?
Ha! Ha! Asterisk!
Old Flood Dragon bellowed, shattering the torrents wrapped around its body. It loosed a sky-darkening volley of water arrows at the young man. Below the surface, its submerged bulk whipped upward, a mountain-shattering sweep of scale and muscle. The drenching arrows that could have pulverized peaks crumbled into glistening spray the moment they reached Soren. His eyes fixed on the immense serpentine tail, racing toward him, wide and armored in scales. He pressed a palm out to meet it. Boom, asterisk. A cyan light bloomed over his fingers just as they struck the scaled hide. They sank inward, driven by inexorable force, and slowly pierced into flesh and blood. Against that dragon tail, his figure looked laughably tiny. By all reason, he should have been swatted into the dirt. But the air itself seemed to hold the deadlock still. A flood dragon vast enough to shroud the sky, pitted in raw power against a young man of ordinary stature. No profound martial technique, no flashy, magnificent combat. Soren just crudely, steadily, shoved the old serpent fiend straight back down. With this old flood dragon, Soren now had a rough measure of his current physical strength, somewhat beyond even the most pinnacle core formation fiends among their ranks.
That was enough. Time to begin.
He flicked the blood from his hand and cast his gaze downward once more.
What kind of monster is this?
Old Flood Dragon had its full-force tail swipe caught and forced back by a mere martial warrior. The dread it felt outstripped words. It had never underestimated Azure Province's devil, suppressing general. Even after its breakthrough, ashore there were still powers like Azure and Nero Yule. And looming behind them all, Martial Veridus, that martial immortal. So it had planned only to kill Sovereign, repay the Fiend King for the precious medicine bestowed, then slip back into Yangchun Fang, where it could stay safely hidden. But neither the Voidfrost Sevenbane sword intent, nor the tyrannical Yin spirit could compare to what it now saw. The young man could wrest control of Yangchun, Fang's waters, possessed a terrifyingly powerful physical body, and even gave off a bloodline aura unnervingly close to its own. It was beyond uncanny. Old Flood Dragon's attention flicked to the Sovereign at Fang On, then silently fixed on the profound armor figure in the sky. It had survived all these years right under Martial Veridus's very nose. Even when brother after brother fell, it had never acted on impulse. That survival was built entirely on patience.
To hell with the Fiend King. If he wanted his precious medicine back, let him come to Yangchun Fang and try to take it.
With that thought, the colossal dragon body slowly began to sink into the water. In the next breath, its slit pupils constricted. The profound armor figure, treading the river waves, had simply vanished. Searing pain lit up Old Flood Dragon's forehead. Soren casually pulled the chaos, iron great halberd free. Amid the spraying curtain of blood, he dropped a savage whip, kick into the dragon's lower jaw. Under that torrent of force, the hill-sized head snapped violently backward. He gripped the great halberd in both hands and drove the crescent blade deep into the creature's throat. Re-AP, asterisk, saturated in cyan light. The chaos iron great halberd tore down with irresistible momentum and carved a wound from the dragon's neck all the way to its abdomen. Thick, viscous blood spilled freely and stained the waters of Yang Chun Fang crimson. He released the weapon and shot a kick into the halberd's pommel. The domineering weapon bolted like a streaking arrow and blasted clean through the dragon's body. Old Flood Dragon had never suffered such a grievous wound. Maddened by the ripping agony, murderous ferocity flared in its eyes. Its jaws gaped wide, and it lunged to bite at its own belly, but the young man had vanished again. Soren reappeared behind it, caught the chaos, iron great halberd mid-flight, and brought it crashing down with devastating force onto the dragon's spine. UFO. Asterisk, under that monstrous power, Old Flood Dragon's enormous body smashed uncontrollably into the river and kicked up waves of terror. Its form convulsed as it desperately summoned Fenghe to churn and surge, sweeping toward the young man to cover its retreat. This time, Old Flood Dragon had no fantasy of harming this devil, suppressing general. It wanted only a momentary screen, so it could escape back into the depths. But the raging waves, instead of crashing down, spiraled upward like a water dragon and lifted Soren gently aloft. He stood silent on the swirling water, halberd in hand, calmly overlooking the river below. In an instant, a bleak, Bone-chilling gale swept across Yangchun Fang. A drizzling rain followed. Old Flood Dragon felt a coldness sinking deep, as though even its fiend core were freezing solid. Where the rain splashed onto its body, the jet-black scales dissolved at a shocking pace. A thick wave of fear surged through its heart. This terror ran deeper than pain. It came from recognition. The scene was all too familiar. Every single method the opponent had used, it had seen before. The azure light of Peacock Vale, the water control of the dragon clans, the baleful wind and killing rain of the Qing, Min She Tedi. These were divine abilities famous among the fiends, now wielded by a lone human martial warrior.
You devil!
The old flood dragon let out a wretched howl. Faced with that sky, shrouding rain of baleful murder, it dared not keep its vast true form any longer. It twisted, shrinking into human shape, and turned to flee. The piercing shriek echoed across Fang'an. Countless officers of the Demon Suppression Division stood rooted to the ground, staring blankly at that profound armor silhouette in the sky, summoning wind and rain, gathering water to form a dragon. He had stepped over the river's waves and arrived. Now he simply stood there in silence, and every river demon below lost all will to resist. In a distant village, the widow and madman watched the terrible spectacle on the river with wide eyes.
A naiad!
She had seriously just used a ruler to measure him at random back then. How had she measured a true naiad? No wonder he'd ordered the villagers to eat the river fiend raw. It had been punishment after that impostor dared profane his majesty. Under the astonished gaze of the masses, the profound armor young man hurled his great halberd back toward Fang'an. It crashed into the ground, driving deep, and stood upright beside the sovereign. Soren swept forward like a gentle breeze. Just as the transformed old flood dragon was about to plunge into the water, the blade in his hand slashed a streak of thick ink through the air. That hideous fanged dragon head came off in a single stroke. He extracted the Jiao core and took the essence blood.
Core Formation Realm Flood Dragon slain. Total lifespan 9,200 years. Remaining lifespan 2,600 years. Absorption complete.
The dragon had not even managed to revert to its true form before Soren tossed it lightly toward Fang'an. Everyone remained dazed, still lost in disbelief.
It's been a great help, old general.
Soren walked back to the pair and casually dropped the severed dragon head beside them. It quickly swelled back to the size of a small mountain peak. He had to admit Elder Chen had performed adequately. The old flood dragon had stayed right where they expected, not running off somewhere else, which saved him considerable time. This plump Jiao core held no less cultivation than the combined strength of those two green lion brothers.
Huh?
Sovereign and Liu Yu, Chuen exchanged bewildered glances. Sovereign truly had no idea what part of that fight had been a great help from him, since his weapon had been snatched away the moment the fighting began.
This old man has a question, but I'm not sure if I should voice it.
Sovereign's brow furrowed. He hesitated, then asked,
Are you truly naiad?
Soren looked at him in silence, his expression turning odd. Sovereign gritted his teeth and slapped his own forehead in frustration. A cultivator at the Core Formation realm, and he'd just asked a question as foolish as any common mortal would. But the sight before him defied all explanation, and he wasn't the only one. Even the old flood dragon had screamed in despair, calling him a fiend, which meant even fiends couldn't understand it. Liu Yu, Chuen understood the old man's feelings completely, but compared to him, Liu pulled himself together far quicker. He'd seen something like this once before, after all. Just swap the Zeri for a flood dragon. Just. Liu Yu, Chuen suddenly felt a powerful urge to slap himself. A Zeri at the Solidification Perfection realm and a Core Formation Perfection realm flood dragon. Could you just casually swap them?
In any case, the flood dragon is dead.
Sovereign lowered his hand, a trace of confusion flickering in his eyes. 5 days. The bane that had tormented him for 600 years now lay sprawled lifeless on the riverbank.
Did this mean he could finally relax a little?
Inside the county seat, thick, coppery blood filled every street and alley. The old flood dragon's body was far too massive, its hide too tough to be pierced by any blade or axe. Even Liu Yu Chuen, a trusted deputy general at the Solidification Perfection realm, had tried and failed to pry off a single scale. In the end, they had no choice but to ask Elder General Chen to cut it into cart-sized chunks, which were then hauled to the commandery town. The terrifying commotion from Yangchun Fang earlier, joined by those piercing dragon cries that seemed ready to split heaven and earth, had already sent the populace into panic. Rumors spread that the masters of the Demon Suppression Division had angered the Dragon King within Fang, and that all of Linfangjun would soon be devoured. No one expected the ruckus to end so swiftly. Within half a day, huge slabs of flesh were dragged past their very eyes, carted out of the city. When that small mountain-sized dragon head was hoisted high, its shadow swallowed the whole street. Its hideous, savage face lay bared, sharp fangs gleaming. Only its now dull eyes held a hidden, lingering terror. Even a single glance made hearts quiver and run cold. Yet the townsfolk couldn't resist peeking out from behind their doors. The more they looked, the more they feared. The more they feared, the more thrilling it felt. From somewhere, a story began to spread. The Dragon King of Yangchun Fang had committed such monstrous slaughter that it provoked heaven's wrath. Naiad shed magnificent dark robes, donned armor, and stepped forth from the waves holding a heavenly decree. Thunder Duke and Rain Mother assisted from the clouds. With summoned wind and rain, they executed the vile beast. The trusted deputy general from Jade Mountain Commandery would never believe such superstitious nonsense. He held his horse's reins, staring at the old flood dragon in a daze.
When had Elder Chen gained abilities like these?
Without thinking, he muttered.
Has General Chen's realm advanced again?
In the carriage behind him, a maiden clad in profound armor quietly lifted the curtain. Her gaze fell on the dragon's head as well.
If the old general had truly advanced, he wouldn't have sent word to Jade Mountain Commandery every time trouble arose.
Azure stepped down from the carriage. Instantly, many constables of the Demon Suppression Division halted. Liu Yu, Chuen, who was overseeing the transport of the dragon head, hurried forward, looking ashamed.
Lord Yang, if I'd known, I would never have troubled you to come.
If I'd known.
Azure tilted her head slightly, her eyes resting on the cracked wound on the dragon's forehead.
That wound matched the Chaos Iron. Great Halbert's shape, but the cultivation power behind it didn't match. With General Chen's strength, how could he breach the toughest part of a Core Formation Perfection Fiend? Yet neither senior brother, you nor Zhang Yian, would ever borrow each other's weapon.
At that thought, Azure withdrew her gaze.
Where is he?